Conrad actually runs a business at UTech that looks at marketing and analytics. And Linkledln, who is at Google, he does everything analytics and otherwise, if you ask me. So it's a very timely conversation we're going to have. This what we're going to be doing here this evening is something I started last week. It's the second in a series on what we call Caribbean thought leadership. It's the second in a series called Caribbean thought leadership. So I'm glad that the right people are joining the session today. So great, Stephen, thank you for joining. So Stephen, who is joining, is a member of the teaching staff, also a business owner with a company, Business Intelligence. Quite a fee with the whole space of the analytics. So I think who are here are very good candidates for this conversation. And with your permission, I am really going to ask that I be allowed to record this meeting. So it's very good that we're having a conversation like this. This might be about an hour long, and we have the right people in the conversation. So without any further ado, I sincerely hope everyone is hearing me and everyone is seeing my screen. Everyone is seeing my screen?
Yes.
So, okay. I'm not sure if we may have a few more persons who will join the session. I record the session because what it does, it allows for the community of staff and students to also hear the conversation. And as you can see from my screen, this is leadership data analytics. Last week we were, looking at the whole space of artificial intelligence and game development. And for once, I'm not running the risk that somebody could say we're duplicating ourselves. We're going to get right into the conversation in a moment. But a pleasant welcome to you, gentlemen, to this session. There are a few persons who I expect, on this call. Well, Yang, thank you for coming. I'll update my panel to reflect that Dr. Yang Song is here. Mr. Earl Stewart will be here. And Conrad, thank you for coming. I'll update the press notice at the end of this podcast session with all the attendees, seeing that I send out an extended list.
No problem.
So I thank you for coming. Last week was when we had kicked off this series, and this Building Business Value series kick off, where we looked at artificial intelligence at larger space and the whole area of game development. And we had a very riveting conversation. I mean, when you get a chance, you can play back the sessions just to get a sense of what we had discussed and what we came out of that with. And we are seeing quite a few important moves that need to be made in the space. We are offering at the University of Technology Jamaica new degrees in applied artificial intelligence. But interestingly, we are also offering a new degree we're also offering a new degree. We're also offering a new degree in the space of data analytics. And, the data analytics was offered first in the offerings of the University of Technology degrees and has had good traction. However, for today's discussion, we're going to put this into a deep dive context. And I want us to weigh in as the practitioners of the space on some of the points that are here, and possibly more points that you may think useful to this conversation that we are about to have. Very specifically, if you see my board, the pointers really has to look at, well, we should start with, okay, data analytics versus artificial intelligence. Is there a difference between those two spaces to make the distinction? And I'll ask each of you as panelists to weigh in on that as a starting point. We'll look at the university degrees in analytics versus big tech training. And probably the fact that Google is here, Google is planning to offer us a Google Analytics training in the summer. You know, and other institutions may want to come and do a similar thing, but is this the way to go? Should we be looking at big tech versus university degrees, or both possibilities? So we'll throw that out to the conversation this afternoon, and I'm glad that Dr. Yang Song is here with us. Could get a perspective from his own university at University of North Carolina, Wilmington, where this is concerned. Then we want to move the conversation quickly afterwards into how do we create value with analytics? How do we really create value with analytics? And value means that we can move it specifically from it just being something trainable for the classroom to it being of value to the business or to the community, right? How do you identify a problem which requires analytics? That's another piece of the puzzle. How do you identify? We have experts here. How do you identify a problem? Do we go out there and just try and find problems, or people have to give us the problems to work on, albeit as a university, or you as a business? So in this conversation this evening, we have the business community here and we have the academic community. This is the format of all our specific thought leadership forums. This is the way we actually moving them forward. And, you know, for the purposes of you, the public listening in, we ensure that these presentations come back to you at the end of the podcast, you know, with a high quality, so you can listen and also make your comments at the bottom of this podcast in the post. And the last point we'll have for the evening is, how do you model a solution for analytics, assuming that you have the right talent pool to be doing that? We were having a full conversation last week about the right talent and so on. But this conversation is a continuation from last week with a deeper dive on some of the pointers that were raised. So without any further ado, I am going to allow us to jump in and just to ask the panel in the context of weighing in, and I'll ask Linkledln probably to start from it, please. From the Google standpoint, and thank you for spending some time with us from Google. Could you just say for me quickly, please, who you are from Google, what you do, and then just tell me probably Google's perspective of what analytics is as opposed to artificial intelligence as a courtesy.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sean. Yes, thanks for having me here. Yeah, as you know, I'm from Jamaica. I actually started out computer science when I was attending Veer Technical.
Yes, sir.
And stuff. So I always have to give shout out to Veer.
And thank you for that, sir.
Yes, of course. So I've been in the Valley over 20 years actually. And as you know, when you met me last year, I was working for Facebook.
Yes.
And now I'm working for Google.
Yes.
One of the things you realize that when you run a large infrastructure, you need data. You have a lot of data. So you have all these transactions happening, whether it's, you know, configure networks or people uploading posts and, you know, on the sites or stuff like that, or we're collecting from, you know, the different, you know, we call it a web crawling, because the way Google do search is that they do a web crawling and find websites, and they keep all of that data there. So data is actually part of these systems, right? It's part of your DNA to have data. But how do you make decision on data, right? So there are two ways you can look at this. So for analytics, you know, I mean, obviously analytics is part of AI, but you can do analytics without AI, for example. So I want to distinguish that. So you have all of this data, right? And let's say you have a lot of websites and you're searching for a term. How do you make sure the relevant term is surfaced, right? So this is where the AI would come in now. So what you can do, you can use different metrics based on how the website are surfaced. And then you can say, okay, based on this website, quality of links or backlinks and all that, you can actually make sure the relevant information comes up. Because when you do search, you can get a lot of very bad responses for something that you want. So you want to make sure that the quality of the responses are good. So you have to tune the algorithm in terms of the different data points that you're putting in. And this is where AI come into play, right? So you can use AI now with a model that says, based on these parameters, the algorithm can return the right results, right? And I'm just trying to dumb it down to make it simple so people can understand it, right? So basically, you use AI in that sense. Now, the other place where you use AI is in terms of decision making. So if you put, not AI, if you look at data analytics without AI, you're running the business and you have to look at, for example, forecasting. For example, I'll give you a good real world example. When COVID hit, we had you could say you have a good problem to solve. There's a lot of demand that came on the infrastructure. So typically we have data scientists looking at projections out and they're running models to say, we need X amount of servers, we need X amount of switches based on growth in data and stuff. So you use data in that context. But what I'm saying is that when COVID hit, we had no idea, we were over demand, right? So what we had to do now is take all the data we had and say, what services can we turn down or deprioritize to prioritize other services? So now with all this data you have now, you can't just look at this data and make any sense of it. You have to use some analytical engines, some tools like R or Python to take that data and kind of dumb it down in a way that says, hey, maybe if I turn off this services, if I turn off, SSL internally between two servers, I can save some resources, save CPU or memory. So the two of them go hand in hand. Obviously, AI is a more automated approach whereby you can automate the process and make recommendations. And I use the word recommendation because in some cases you don't want the AI to make the decision because that can be catastrophic, but it can recommend an outcome, right? But analytics is what feeds the data into AI. And AI is really a question of models. You have different models. And I'm not sure if you guys have looked into this. There's a new concept coming out now called AGI. So if you look at AI today, you have very specialized models. So for example, if you have a model to identify cats, that model is very good at identifying cats. But do you have a model that can identify cats, dogs, cows and stuff? This is where the concept of artificial general intelligence comes in. And this is where people are scared of it because with AGI, you can actually have a human-like behavior where, you can put that in a robot or something and it can do multiple functions. But the AI we have today is generally specialized. The models are very specialized. So you can say for search is a search model. You can have a model to look at pictures or look at the quality of the pictures, those kind of things. So there's a lot of information. I'll come back to it.
Fair enough. So this is a very good point. So a very good starting point. And this is the Google perspective you're sharing. What do you do at Google again for me, Linkledln?
I forgot to mention it. I work in the engineering team here. I'm an engineering manager here. Managing different projects and programs. Very large programs actually, because one of the things, like we use BGP and those things a lot to run our network and stuff. So I do a lot of programs around keeping that safe and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So thanks for starting off the conversation and welcome to Dr. Arnett Campbell from the School of Computing, one of my co-hosts and co-founders for this Caribbean Thought Leadership Initiative. And welcome Mr. Earl Stewart from the Jamaica Customs Agency. Great to have a diversity of panel here this evening. So we have Mr. Stephen Scale from the School of Computing. We have Mr. Conrad Matheson from Pixel Perfect, its CEO, right? We have as well here, Dr. Yan Song from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He's a professor there, and he's also one of our University of Technology School of Computing external examiners for our new CIS degree, or Computer Information Systems degree, in data analytics with technology entrepreneurship. So gentlemen, all welcome. We just kicked off the discussion and you joined at an opportune point in time. This is our second session in the series of Caribbean Thought Leadership, creating business value. Today we are looking at data analytics in terms of the value creation to the chain. And we started the conversation so far with saying, well, okay, hold on. So there's this whole space of artificial intelligence we spoke about last week, but there's a distinction with data analytics versus artificial intelligence. Linkledln was just sharing his perspective, and as a Googleite and a past Facebookite, he was giving us that industry perspective. So I'm going to shift the conversation. Probably I will ask Young Song to weigh in, followed by Conrad to give me their views. What is the difference between data analytics versus artificial intelligence? And Young Song, being an academic, probably will give me his perspective at this point where this is concerned.
Hey folks, can you hear me?
Hearing you quite well, Young. Thank you for joining.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hey everyone, this is Yang Sang, and I did my PhD in NC State University, and after that, I moved to University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and I have been teaching here since 2017. And they
Excellent.
hired me from the first day I got hired. Well, I started to teach in the data science program, and I'm one of the designer of the data science program here, and it has been almost 5 years. Honestly, I have witnessed some of the changes of the industry related to data science and data analytics. And what I have been saying to my students is, data science or data analytics is getting cheaper and cheaper. So now there are two possible ways you can do. You can go with the data analytics, and then be good on using tools. Now, with more and more drag and drop data analytics tool available, writing the good code is not that important because a lot of things can be done. And you don't have to, maybe 2 years ago, I do a lot of things with Google Colab. And now a lot of the entry-level data analytics can be done with Google Data Studio. And Linkledln, I'm pretty sure you know both of the products, right?
Yes, I know about them. Yeah.
So your distinction so far, Young, is that, hey, data analytics, you're really playing around with tools. That's the option you're suggesting, as opposed to playing around with models. Okay, continue. Yep.
And then, and on the opposite side, and if you want to go to the challenging parts and you want to become the real data scientist, and then there is a much steeper ladder you have to climb. Because you are trying to train yourself to be the hardcore AI person. So there are two career paths I see. If you want to go to the data analytics, I'm not saying it is a lower position, but you are going to be focused on using tools instead of writing code all day, every day. Do you need to know how to write code? Of course. And you also need to know how to find the right tool, and then what are the rules of creating the visualizations or creating the dashboards. So, doing the dashboard is one of the big things when you're doing the data analytics. So that's one career path. And another career path is if you want to do the hardcore AI, and then, go ahead and climb the harder ladder, and then those are the two possible ways to go.
Those are the two possible. So, excellent points. I appreciate that.
And for the students who are in the middle, they are not that interested in doing the visualizations, learning the tools, and they are not that strong in the hardcore AI skills. And in next few years, after 5 years or 10 years, there won't be positions available for this kind of person. So do the data analytics or do the hardcore AI. Those are
I love that point, Dr. Yang Song. I love that point. You said in a couple of years, there might not be some of the jobs or some of the people in the middle. I want to keep that point and I want to hold it. I'm going to go around the Zoom room here now for this podcast session and move on to, at this point, ask Conrad to weigh in on this particular conversation. So we had an industry view from Google with Linkledln. We had an academic view from Dr. Yang Song at UNC Wilmington. So I'm putting it back to industry. Are we on the same page in terms of the definitions for analytics versus AI? What's your view, sir?
I think it's a perfect conversation. I think Linkledln did a very good introduction to kind of dumb it down to the basics, which I would say is understanding exactly what's going on with the data analytics, where concerns the two between what is AI and what is data analytics, and can say one is really about models that can enhance the data analytics and can improve it to give greater results or improve speed of results, I would say, right? So what you can do individually, analyzing it one by one. Now, you don't want, when you have 50,000 servers, somebody's checking them one by one if it's which one is going to potentially go down. So the AI now could say, based on all this data that you have set up for me using this platform, it can now say, I recommend that three of these get shut down, two of that go up, two of this go down. So I can understand the use of the analytics and also the AI supported results that it may bring. So that is what we are also looking into as well, because there are companies that have things that they need to make on a very fast and quick basis. They need to know first, and I think Linkledln, maybe you will understand the Jamaican context. We are a little behind, where the data is not clean yet for most Caribbean companies. So as a result, you can't get great data analytics. Thus, there can be great AI models built for them. You understand? So what is one of the biggest concerns now in the data analytics context? In the data analytics context is just that, can we fix our data framework, and then can we now get the right insights from it, and then after that use the information to build models to improve it? So I actually agree. And then on the side of the talent, I think Young Sang was talking about a while ago, the gaps is that the university needs to make sure that the degrees that they're producing is enabling the two sides of the coin, which is what we are trying to do internally as well, is that people who, we have realized that there are people who can use the R, can use the Python, but not very, that can get us up to a particular point, but necessarily won't be able to visualize information for everybody else that's in the conversation, right? For them to view it and use the information. So there are some data scientists that can pull it, organize it, find what is wrong, but a coder that needs to get the insights, a strategist that needs to get the insights, a business person like myself that needs to get the insight, it needs to be visualized in a quick way that by tomorrow morning, you get this insight today, it is visualized to me on the go through Google Data Studios to say, this is what is happening in the business. Make this, you can make this decision on the fly. And so I agree with him that we need to make sure that we can use the tools to do that. You know, do the first part, use the tools to do that. And then on the second point is using that information now to get advanced skills. I would think the next set of skills is to make sure that these people can actually build models now to advance the business outcomes that are required. So excellent. I actually totally agree with the situation that we have communicated so far, right? And I think it's a good sign of the talent pool that is in the conversation.
Very good, sir. And I appreciate that point, Conrad, which is why at UTech, we have decided to make sure that we are offering the two strands. We are offering a bachelor's in computer information systems with a specialization track in data analytics. And we have also now recognized we're going to go the full gamut, and we'll be launching for this August a bachelor's in applied artificial intelligence to meet the two audiences, the two talents spaces that you are so far suggested. So, all right. So thanks for that view, Conrad. Mr. Jarrett, Earl Jarrett from Customs, and I'll ask Stephen Scale and Dr. Campbell from UTech to weigh in. But as a Jamaica Customs agency, I know for a fact that you guys are busy into data analytics and business intelligence and artificial intelligence. Can you give us a perspective from your company, sir, in terms of what you see as the underlying differences between data analytics versus AI? And is it both that you're using, or you have a preference for one over the other?
Professor Thorpe, thank you for invite, and good afternoon to all the colleagues.
Yes.
You know, I don't mind the name Earl Jarrett, because that's
Earl Stewart, that's what I called you, Jarrett, a while ago. Earl
right.
Stewart.
But it's okay.
I associate you with serious
and
businessmen, big
I
businessmen.
don't mind the association. That's all.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Earl Stewart. Thank you very much. Yes.
It's a pretty interesting time that we're in, and it's a pretty interesting topic. So far, I am in agreement with all the sentiments that I've expressed on both data analytics and artificial intelligence from the different perspectives. At Jamaica Customs Agency, I'll say mostly we are focused right now on data analytics, albeit looking into how we can utilize artificial intelligence to bring about levels of efficacy for the agency. One would say, the platform that we have implemented as Secuda World, there is somewhat a bit of artificial intelligence that is embedded in the application based on certain decision making that is done by the system, right? So somewhat we're utilizing it, but we're looking to see for the full gamut of the agency, how we can leverage such or utilize such. But we focus heavily on utilizing data analytics, albeit because
Excellent.
we focus on risk assessment and identifying compliant traders so that we can keep trade facilitation moving and not obstructing what we call legitimate or compliant traders. But here's my thing, and this is probably a more personal view regarding data analytics. What I've observed over the years is that there's a number of tools, and but the skill sets of persons to leverage or to aid the a company in getting the value from the utilization of those tools, there's a significant deficit. So you invest a lot of money, significant amount of money to acquire these tools and such forth, but then they're just used as data mining systems and stuff. So the skill sets because it does require some amount of skill set. I mean, I don't know if it's okay if I get in trouble. I hope I don't. If applications like Tableau that exist that we utilize, I find that persons just use Tableau to do simple charts or to data mine per se, but it's a powerful application, right? And to use it to determine value for an organization, there's a deficit in the skill sets where that is concerned. It reminds me of Excel. I normally say that most persons use less than 2% of the capabilities of Excel and such forth. And you find in the ranks of even managerial ranks, there are persons who cannot write a basic formula in Excel to produce a report or something. So that has been my observation regarding data analytical tools that exist, that they're there, they're fancy, they're nice, they can add value, but the skill set across the agency and the person that just went before me and spoke about it, the strategists that need to know how to use this tool, the manager that need to know how to use this tool.
Yes.
There's a deficit there, and so you find high investment but low value return.
Low value return. I'm going to come back to these one. Wonderful points from the panel so far, and I'm glad I have a broad participation of views this evening. So at this point, following on from Earl's comment just now, I'm going to defer to Mr. Scale, who is at the University of Technology, Jamaica, here with us, but he's also a business owner in his own right, doing this type of services generally. So Stephen, weigh in on this argument, data analytics versus AI. What's your view on this?
Thank you very much, Dr. Thorpe. I think the fellow panelist has really hit the nail on the head as it relates to the different. Ditto.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, not much more to add. I mean, just probably from a different perspective of understanding. Think about intelligence from a human perspective.
Yes.
You know, our ability to access information from our environment, to connect that information with past experience, knowledge, and to make decisions about whatever it is we're facing based on based on the data, the input that we're getting along with our historic previous knowledge. That really covers artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, instead of having a human being who is doing that, is our ability to simulate how a human mind work to machines, computers, so that we are able to create models that use historic input data that has been processed, train models to understand or make decisions based on historic data. And when it comes across new information, it is able to run that through those models and make decisions quickly, much quicker than human beings would take to analyze, process that data and come to conclusions, right? And what, as Linkledln said, gives us recommendations that we can know as the decision makers take. But you still have applying our gut to it, but at least now we have informed, we have data-driven models that can allow us to make decisions with confidence and not just based on our gut feeling as managers. Data analytics does use or applies artificial intelligence, but they're separate. Data analytics is really collecting, getting data, analyzing it, utilizing that to find trends, answer questions, and to draw conclusions. But they are very closely related, but different in their own rights.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. Wonderful viewpoints. And Dr. Campbell, you at this point could weigh in, who is with us at the School of Computing here as well. Your view on this argument of analytics versus AI.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, thanks for the input from everyone. I'm certainly just sitting as a student here this evening and learning. But I have some questions that that have been going through my mind as I listen. Historically, we have had issues with many of the businesses in Jamaica and by extension the Caribbean being led by entrepreneurs who are not necessarily, they may be smart in their business acumen, knowing how to trade, but not knowing how to use decision models or use or work best with these kinds of skill sets that we speak of. So for example, and Earl did touch on the topic of, you know, people not being knowledgeable about the use of a tool like Excel. Much more tools such as Tableau and others that are now being used to build sophisticated dashboards. There's a tendency for people to be attracted to the pretty charts. And they will tell you, if you are doing a dashboard for them, they say, well, I want a donut there, or I want a bar chart there, or I want a pie chart there, but they don't know necessarily why do we use a bar chart? What does it represent versus a bar chart? They don't necessarily know what information is being communicated by that. And so there is a knowledge gap in terms of what we have to do, I believe, to help people to understand how to interpret these dashboards that they're asking persons to build to communicate information about what's going on, whether it is within their company, their industry, etc. So that's a major challenge I see for us as educators. So I hope that we can weigh in a little bit on that as well.
All right, good point, Dr. Campbell. As a matter of fact, what you have all done as a panel so far is justify, at least for our audience out there in podcast land, the rationale for needing to have credentials, albeit at a degree level for data analytics and or a degree level for artificial intelligence. Albeit it is a degree or it is credential stacking with short courses as the option for the offerings. As you have all said so far as a panel, you know, the differences on the line between data analytics and AI is that analytics is really looking at tool-based implementations, probably for which the AI engineer, you know, or analyst would have actually build some of those preset tools to give to the business analyst, who is the practitioner under the analytics track. So this is a very, very, you know, interesting conversation. It's a very deliberate conversation, to the point that even just you explaining the first point, I'm already seeing another podcast session just to look at tools and the analysis of tools that are used in data analytics, and then to start looking at models as it relates to AI, so we can have a comprehensive learning space in this podcast series so the public can actually engage. So great set of points to all panelists this afternoon. Now, segueing into this, so should we then be focusing on offering degrees in analytics as opposed to big tech training? I'm going to start with the big tech in the house, which is Google here this afternoon. Let's start with Linkledln. Linkledln, what is your perspective? Because we are going to do a Google summer training camp at UTech, and likely we can invite others across the country and the Caribbean to be a part of it, as we had done with another initiative. But tell me, I'm playing devil's advocate now. Is big tech training better than the degree in its offering? That's a perspective.
Yeah, jokingly, yes, but anyway, let me.
Jokingly, yes. Yeah, I like to say jokingly, yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think you need both, actually. I think you need both. Let me just clarify that. You need both of them. So you need a theoretical, you need good theoretical background and theoretical foundations. For example, traditionally you have to learn statistics in school and maths, and those are good foundations for analytics and data science. So I think you need a degree. But what will happen is, and why the big tech and those companies are doing this training, is because they see a gap in the marketplace in terms of skill sets to fill position that they have. So they said, well, the academic world is not keeping up enough, so we have to go in and intervene and provide our training to fill some of those gaps, right? So it's not so much about competing with a degree. I think it's more of providing a complementary thing, for the students or for workers, right? And two things. Another thing you need to look at too. Somebody may have done a degree in physics, for example, which give them good theoretical background, and they want to move into data analytics or AI. They may just need to take a top-up, diploma or something that allows them to transfer into that field. So it's not so much about them taking that specialized analytics degree, but it's a question of whether the market there's a high demand for analysts. We know that. We know there's a high demand out there. And how do you fill that demand quickly in an agile way? Before people go through that 4-year cycle, you need to get people out there in 6 months. So one way, either the university themselves do it, or the big tech can intervene and say, okay, it's another part to it is that we have experience as well, because we know how to build a large infrastructure. So we can actually share some of that knowledge back into the market as well.
Into the market.
So it's
excellent point.
Yes, yeah. So I think it's useful in that sense. Yeah.
So you're saying, in essence, to complement the degrees, if the person is not in the computing space, it could be a physicist, it could be a social scientist, it could be that person could be augmented with the short course type credentials and still be able to practice as a data analyst on the data analytics track. Excellent point. I've
And,
heard it.
and one more point, one quick point too. If somebody
Yes.
did computer science 20 years ago, for example, they may not have
Yes.
touched some of these topics. So
Yes.
they may need to go back to school in that sense, you know.
They need to go back to school. So okay. So thank you for that point, Linkledln. So Yang, from where you sit, is this the consistent view at you places like where you are, that the degrees may not necessarily be the only option you're offering the students, or there's a different way you do things in your space? Weighing based on what Linkledln just made as his viewpoint.
Well, I would say the degree and certificate,
Yes.
they are both useful, and well, they can well, for the degree, they're provided by the universities,
Yes.
of course, and for a certificate, well, a university can also do a certificate program for like half year or 1 year, or if there are some leaders in the industry, they are offering that. I would encourage some of my students to take that too. For example, I'm at North Carolina. In North Carolina, SAS is a huge company here. So, well, a lot of my students, they are using their own resources, their own time and money to get the SAS certificate. Because if they want to find a local job at North Carolina, well, showing a SAS certificate is going to help a lot, especially for the pharmaceutical industry or healthcare industry. They really love SAS. So we are teaching SAS in our program, but we do not do a SAS certificate in the university. But as far as I know, a lot of students love to get a SAS certificate before they go into the job market.
So it is a big tech that comes. So SAS comes and provide the training. That's what you're saying. Okay.
Well, SAS provides the certificate training online as an online paid program.
Yeah, there's a SAS University option that you can access through the cloud.
Through the cloud. Excellent, excellent set of points here so far. So both of you are saying, well, both offerings will need to complement each other. Okay, so I'm going around the table here and asking the same question, but I'm gonna put a little bit more spice in the conversation. Do you think, gentlemen, and probably I'll ask Conrad next, and probably Earl can be followed afterwards, right? Do you think Caribbean companies should then say that as a part of the offering of any of these degrees, you need the big tech qualification, probably from a SAS or a Google and other entities to complement the degree? Or is it that you would forego if the persons don't have the degree and hire that individual if they have the big tech training certificate only from a Google or from a SAS or from a Tableau? Please weigh in at this point. It's the same question of concern of either of the two, but being a little bit more deliberate to see if, based on your urgencies, given the skills gap you mentioned earlier, the knowledge gap, if this would be a remedial action to just take the big tech training for analytics engineers or analysts and put them in once they finish 3 or 6 months from Google. Because Google now, for example, does not need, they're saying they don't need degrees anymore to hire people. They'll hire you if you come in with certain skills. And Linkledln, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm asking the other panel, starting with Conrad, to weigh in on that comment relating to the second point.
It's funny, in certain roles I will, but not in every role, right? So in certain roles, roles certainly, because the base, what they will do is know how to use the tool when they do those 6 short courses, but not necessarily a very good analyst or deep thinking personnel. So what happened now is we have seen where persons come into the company with a lot of short courses and cannot manage the work, because when the client starts saying the scenarios are unique now, not when the scenarios require thinking 2 or 3 different points together to get the result. They can't figure it out. However, they would know the skill and know to use the tool. So what I would say is, A merger seemed to be the best base for us in some cases, while in some cases, and I'm just trying to show you both sides of the coin. So I'll see a
Yes.
student that comes in from UTech that did a data enterprising course, right?
Yes.
And comes into the company, but cannot do proper data science in terms of understanding analysis, doing visualization, those things, cannot do those things, right? But came out of a course that actually taught them how to do data science, meaning R, Python, those things. They can do that, but they
Yes.
can't do the proper analysis. They can't use a tool. They can't use Tableau, all of that. So what happens now is that we now will say, when we look at the resume, we look at Tableau. If they have Tableau certification, that would be an edge.
Yes.
And use Google Data Studios, that would be an edge. If they can,
Yes.
you know, so some of these big tech courses or certifications is now an advantage now on
Yes.
top of your degree. But we have
Excellent.
also seen, funnily enough, people of passion that maybe have studied something totally different, but has now found passion through doing these short courses.
Yes.
Applied, we have interviewed them. They maybe pass their case study part, and they're also able to do proper discussions and analysis, and
Yes.
they're able to be taken in as well. So now the floor is now open now in my current company structure, is that we're open to whichever one as long as they pass our interview system. But I would say
Excellent.
it's open now. It's no longer either or. If you have a degree, you must get it. Or if you have a certification, you must get through. It's now a merger of, because us, one of the big conversations that we have never had, and I want us to open the floor today, and we never had it last week, and I want to make sure we have it today, is we don't
Yes.
talk about the soft skills part that is required along with these hard skills.
Yes. 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 Thank you for that. I will
It
make
is
sure maintain.
it's the biggest piece that affects the great successful people, and I'm sure Lachlan will be able to spot that working in these big tech companies, is
Yes.
because patience patience is just a basic core soft skill that will be required if you're doing data science, because
Yes.
you can't do data science and be impatient with information.
Yeah, and you have to know to go there and collect data from customers and
Right.
understand the problems.
And,
Yes.
right. And then you have to know, can be able to have certain other skills where you have to know, have some logical process thinking of, if this happens and this affects this, then this could affect that, and then that could affect that. Now, if those are not soft skills that are imposed along the hard skills, we will have a difficult point. So I'm just saying,
Yes.
in the
Yes.
conversation of this, we will have to, because the aim of this discussion is to empower the university to do the
Yes.
right thing.
And the
I'm
community.
saying,
Yes.
and the
Yes.
community. I am saying, if we're going to build this community, we need to make sure that we're empowering them both technically
Yes.
and personally to achieve the goals that we have set out. Right?
Brilliant point. Brilliant point.
I would just break the point, is that the systems of the world are not department based anymore. They are small group based, which is growth teams, disruptive teams, cross-functional teams. And when
Yes.
when these cross-functional teams, when these people don't have the skill to hear a creative person come up with an idea, and they have this insight skills, when the two can meet, that's when you get
Yes.
real business solutions. So what I
Yes.
would love for us to
Brilliant
get
point.
out of this conversation is not just looking at, is the degree enough, is the certification enough,
Yes.
are we creating a complete individual
Individual and
ready,
the attributes of that skill of that individual.
ready for
Yes.
the work
Yes.
world?
Yes.
So that's a
Yes.
conversation I would love to have.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we're going to take it into the next point in terms of the creation of value, because that creation of value piece will assume that we have the right attributes of the graduate and the right attributes of the person who will hire. Man, listen, this is a powerful conversation. I feel like we could break this down into probably more than one podcast sessions indeed, because this is where we think we get some value for our time on a Sunday evening like this, to appreciate a very important point. So Stephen, Earl first probably, and then Stephen and Dr. Campbell, could you weigh in that order? You have a view on the second one on degrees versus the big tech training?
So Professor Thorpe, colleagues, I think both are necessary.
Yes.
I personally don't value one over the
Over
other.
the
I
other.
think,
Yes,
yeah, I
yes.
think both come in to help to deliver a certain level of value and
Yes.
benefit to those who will serve, or to the business that we, persons are entrepreneurs, to the business that
Yes.
will develop and such forth.
Yes.
I think the degree lays certain foundation
Yes.
and brings together the integration of knowledge that is needed to set that platform from which one
Yes.
should launch from. While
Yes.
the big tech courses, and I've done certain courses that would call big tech courses, right? Those things come in to me to help you to specialize or to deepen or enhance certain skill sets that you would need to deliver the value. And so with that, similar to my colleague that went before, I've seen persons who they have what we call, you're calling the big tech courses, which good technical knowledge and everything. But again, the reasoning to provide that optimal solution
Yes.
and that value added, it's missing, right?
Excellent.
So I mean, case in point, right now, while I'm here in this Zoom meeting, I'm doing something, reworking something that was delivered to me from an MBA grad. And the reason being, the person couldn't think outside the box of an optimal solution to solve the problem, right? But I guess, and I don't want to toot my horn being a UTech student.
Yes, well, that's so good. You can toot your horn on this particular
uh,
one because you take endorse podcast.
you know,
And
I did the skit program, so there were certain
yes,
tools you learn. I did a computer and management program back then, so there are
yes,
certain balance between in the degree learning certain management skills, ICT skills, and certain tools that you were learned that now operating in the industry. I can think of, okay, which tool I can use to solve this problem. How can I do this thing, right? So I'm here reworking, which
okay,
brings into
excellent.
focus and why, while I value the degree program and I say it's necessary, the academia has to look at, from an industry standpoint, what is it they need, right? So this is where industry has to meet academics in terms of those who are responsible or in the business of training persons. What are the skill sets? What are the tools that they will need for varying reasons? And so it's important, that it's not just anymore delivering a degree or a curriculum that gets people through, but when they leave and they come out, what are those skill sets? I guess I'm saying, what are those big tech courses that can, whether they're offered as electives or as complementary courses, to sharpen the skill sets so that they're industry ready.
Excellent, excellent point, Earl. And these are really valuable viewpoints in terms of the attributes of the candidates who come out of these initiatives. You see that the alignment to Linkledln and what Conrad had said brings into sharp focus that while probably Google will hire with and without a degree is based on the attributes of the candidates coming in, being able to solve the problems, understand and solve the problems of those organizations. So I take that point so far. Yes, I take that point.
If I might just weigh in again before you
Yes,
move on, there's
yes,
another thing that we have to give consideration,
yes,
is that the government of, well, Jamaica and of other countries are
yes,
one of the largest set of employers of skill sets, and they have not moved away to change that the one of the requisites for employment, especially at certain level, is a first degree, and
yes,
certain things they need a master's degree. So you will find that if the big tech courses are the only things that are pushed, maybe it work in private sector only. But if you
yes.
find that if you push that alone, then persons coming out will be at a disadvantage. And
Okay,
I've seen it whereby persons have gone to places like, again, I hope I don't get in trouble. Places like Hart, those certain courses, but then they were seeking employment, and then they said no, they still didn't satisfy the minimum requirement.
Okay.
So
Based
that
on
is
this,
something, right?
based on
So
the
that is
point.
something, right? So is either the government or those who are responsible for looking at the minimum requirements for jobs are going to be made more aware and realize that, you know, just because somebody don't have a degree, that doesn't mean they can't execute and get the
Yes.
job done, right?
Excellent.
So that conversation is another conversation that needs to be had with both public and private sector in going forward.
I'll note the point. I note that point that some will leave with a particular training and they still can't meet the jobs of the market. All right, this is an excellent conversation. Just now before yourself, Earl, Connor said, listen, let's go focus on those soft skills of the graduates. Stephen and Sir Campbell, Dr. Campbell, please win and welcome Mr. Paul. Thank you for joining. CEO of Innovate 10X, who was with us last week as well. And we're having a riveting conversation here and a further deep dive into the business value of skills in analytics and AI, but with a more pointed perspective on the degrees versus the big tech credentials, stack training, and all the things you see on our screen this evening. We're catching some very useful points that we'll have to go and implement both as academic institutions as well as academies relating to meeting the needs of the private sector and government sector. So excellent points so far. But Stephen, I wanted you to weigh in. Dr. Campbell, you could also weigh in, please, on this, and I'll give Mr. Paul the last say on the point, and then take up back Connor's point about, let's talk about soft skills, and that's the next point after this. So in that order, Stephen?
Yeah, there's a lot of value to having a university degree, and I think the panelists touch on it. It really gives you a solid foundation upon which to build a career, to build your path going forward. Yes. And we shouldn't undermine the value of persons going through this sort of structured program with a wide variety of courses, modules that seek to develop certain attributes of the person. I'll give you an example. One of the most profound modules I did in my computing and information technology degree was psychology. And a lot of the students complain about UTech. I said, why we have to do psychology? Why we have to do environmental science? Why we have to do all of these courses that don't have anything to do with programming or computing? I just want to be a data scientist or a computer scientist and so forth. But I tell them to step back and take a different perspective, because you want a well-rounded individual, someone who can understand people, someone who can apply technology to solve problems. And that is where I think the university degree can really add a lot of value, is really teaching the core principles, concepts of helping persons to solve problems and to be able to conduct research ultimately to solve problems. That said, big tech training is also very important, because to apply the technology, you can come out with that ability to, or that theory of solving a problem, taking a problem, analyzing it. But then, as Earl said, they invest in the technology and they don't have persons who can use the technology, who can get value from the technology, because there's a gap there. And I think there are synergies to be had between universities and big tech companies like Google and Facebook. So I think they can backward integrate, as Google is doing, as IBM is doing, with the universities, partnering with the universities to help students get that exposure to use this technology, to get access to the cutting edge technology, the technology that is out there in industry, and to apply not just in a theoretical sense, but to really couple that with the research that the students are doing, using the technology, gaining the skills in the technology, applying the soft skills and the problem solving skills in order to solve problems, right? So I think we'll get a much better product coming out if we can create these synergies between the big tech, where the training, the modules can be whether offered as electives or as a part of the capstones, and persons can integrate the big tech training and apply them, utilizing the research methodologies that you learn in university and the problem solving skills to be able to solve real world problems utilizing the technology. So I think there are synergies, and they're not mutually exclusive. I think both of them go hand in hand.
Excellent. So both are required. So, well, Google will be coming on board this summer to provide the summer camp in Google Analytics, and Linkledln already started to line up all the required. So we'll have students from UTech, and we hope to can expand that to other communities who can benefit from such training. So at this point, I'm going to ask Dr. Campbell, followed by Mr. Sheldon Paul, just to weigh in on their views on degrees versus big tech training as outcomes.
Okay, good evening again, afternoon again. I remember about 5 years ago, Sean, you and myself were troubleshooting, and as we face different kinds of challenges, how to get our students to more apply their skills to the realities of Jamaica, to create opportunities in the absence of them getting employment. We started toying with the idea of introducing applied anthropology. You remember?
Oh yeah.
into the degree. Well, I'm certainly one for a good, solid, broad-based education, one that strengthens their ability to think, their ability to think critically and make decisions. So, good first degree is a prerequisite. So academia is very important for any true data analyst or AI specialist. You will have to be savvy, in terms of what you achieve there. You're gonna have to work hard. You're gonna have to acquire the skills. You're gonna have to spend a lot of time learning. And a good program in a university that gives them that kind of solid grounding, enhanced with practice, as we have experimented with a SAPNA kind of experiment. There is a room for more an expanded SAPNA, where the students, they're learning in the classroom, but they come into this space where they interface with industry, where they get to play with the tools that are out there, and are ready, because they are seeing the problems, they are understanding the problem. So when they learn the mathematics, they learn the physics, they can actually see it come to life. The biology, the psychology, everything. The fact that that kind of environment also allow them to work across different kinds of skills, the marketing, the legal, the sciences, the engineering. It helps them to be better prepared to go there in industry, or to continue on in academia, and makes them better for the future. So I think a good mix is definitely there, and we should encourage them to take the industry certifications as well, to become part of the community of practitioners.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Campbell. Probably want to say, I don't want to put a ratio on it and say 50-50 or 60-40, but a good mix, a good balance based on our situation. In agreement. Sir Paul, Sir Sheldon Paul, I know you joined us a few, but I don't know if you want to weigh in on this conversation, especially with a man with your breadth of experience from banking and fintech, running your own startups and needing business analysts and data analytics engineers or AI engineers. What is your view on, well, going with the big tech training as one way of augmenting your outfit or getting the degrees, specific to the area of data analytics as the use case reference here? Not sure if he's hearing me. I wonder if his mic is muted.
I'm not seeing. Oh yeah, his mic is muted. Yeah.
Okay, probably the next one I'll allow him to. It's a good conversation so far, and you have emphasized well the views relating to big tech and training, which brings us to the next point. How do we create value with analytics? And I probably want to start with the view of what Conrad had shared. Listen, you can't get true value unless the human intellect is demonstrating certain skills. So there's the hard skills and there's the soft skills. And probably what you're referring to, well, do you teach at the university emotional intelligence? To be frank, this is a new space. Emotional intelligence, you think that people will be born with it and they have it naturally, or soft skills, they have it naturally. Clearly what Canada is saying is there is a gap. There is a gap there. So let me hear from Google first about this attribute of the kind of graduate or talent when Google, say, recruits them in analytics. Soft skills versus hard skills. Are you looking for one more or the other? Attitude versus aptitude, probably another way to describe the same thing. But let me get a perspective from Linkledln and Google in terms of how it recognizes the creation of value, first from the perspective of the human talent.
Yeah, so if you go back to the soft skill thing, I think they're both important actually. And so when they do the interview loop at most of the tech companies here, they actually have people interview you specific around some of the soft skills. So they actually look, they actually ask you questions. And the way they ask questions is not so much about look at your resume and look at the resume and see what you've done. They try to look at how you can solve problems, right? So they basically walk you through scenarios and stuff. And so we have a person who would interview you on a technical level, like talk about analytics per se, but you have a guy who talk about how you work with teams. And they actually use that to evaluate to see if you're a match for the company. So it's not just the technical thing they look at. The other thing that we do as well, once you come into the company, we use a very fast feedback loop. So basically your team members are always giving feedback on you. So you better work well with people because people are gonna either give you direct feedback and say, you're not doing a good job, or they're gonna feedback to your manager or others, on your performance review. And so those things kind of help you, force you to develop your soft skills real quick and as well as to have good soft skills. So first to get in, you have to pass the interview loop where they look at your competence in terms of your ability to understand soft skill requirements, but they also look at your technical stuff as well. Now, in terms of creating, are you looking at the creating value as well? Is that something you want to look at, Sean?
Yes, please. Yes, the creation of value.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So it's a kind of different question, but in terms of creating value, I kind of look at analytics in a very experimental way, right? So you think about COVID, for example. I just give you an example with COVID. COVID hit and you have all this data coming at you from different angles. For example, here in Santa Clara, one of the things they realized was you have to figure out what metrics you should track to decide how to keep people safe. So it's not so much about the amount of COVID cases that you had that is important. What was important for them was the ICU availability. So one of the things about analytics is the ability to, as humans, to take this data and make sense of it and provide insight to whether it's management or whoever that can allow you to shift your business. In marketing, that's a very well-known thing. For example, if you have a product and you want to market it to, to Jamaica, for example, you can use data analytics now to figure out what set of people, what segment of the market you can focus on, what are their behavior, why would they buy this product? And the only way you can do that is by collecting data and analyzing it. So there's so much value you can create with analytics, and there's so much use cases you can use it for in that sense, right? I mean, it's numerous. I mean, there's so much stuff you can do with it. But the key here is think of it in an experimental sense, that you have a lot of data, you have all the tools that we mentioned earlier, and you have a hypothesis that you want to solve. So you basically say, I want to solve, COVID, how do we keep people safe? And we think and said, oh, well, we need to make sure we have ICUs available. So based on that, we can decide how much we lock down the society, because if we have very little ICUs available, then we need to really get, crazy about not letting people out. And as the ICUs become more available, you can say, okay, maybe I can allow people to go to restaurants and stuff like that. So right away, you're creating value by keeping people safe, by just using data to drive your decision making on an ongoing basis. So that's one example there. Sean.
Excellent example. As a matter of fact, you use one stone and kill two birds. If I can use that Jamaican language, Young, I don't know if you know that language, but
Of
we
course.
can
Yeah, of
share.
course I
We
know
can
it.
explain. I can explain it to Young at some other point if it's the first he may have been hearing it. So you're saying, and Colin, I heard Linkledln very clearly, that people skill in terms of the soft skill at Google when they hire, they literally check that the person has to have the technical competence, which I'm sure our Caribbean companies and the ones in Jamaica here are doing as well. But that people piece is very deliberate in that that person would have to work in teams. And I think you were mentioning it before. They have the cross-functional teams and the interdisciplinary teams, not working individuals or silos. And then they either sink or swim, because people who are genuinely serious about this profession will know whether or not you are at the mark in terms of how you engage. And I'm thinking people skills could mean taking the initiative, like what Linkledln said, to now work on new projects, seeing that there's a lot of data around. Well, food for thought. Let me leave it there. That's what I'm picking up from Linkledln. Good point. But Young, moving on to Dr. Youngson, what is your experience in your neck of the woods in creating value from analytics? Linkledln said, listen, a lot of experimental data is around. It sounds like research to me. But is it the same thing he's saying as an academic to you?
Well, let me come back to the hard skills and the soft skills first. Well, when I'm teaching my students in the Master of the Data Science program,
Yes.
I keep on telling my students this: coding is cheap. What is the core aspects that makes you competitive? Is the reasoning and thinking of doing data science, not the coding itself. So when I'm teaching, well, I encourage students to do the exploration by themselves by doing the Google searches and reading on the Stack Overflow, or reading the official documentation from Scikit-learn, for example. So they got learned how to do those things anyhow. So I don't want to spend a lot of time teaching them how to code. They should be able to do that by themselves. But for the reasoning and the thinking part, I do want to spend a lot of time on those parts. For example, I show students a data visualization and they say, this visualization is garbage. Let's talk about that. And then we say why, we did have a long discussion about why this visualization is garbage, and then how do we fix that? How can we come up with a easy way to visualize the same information without giving the viewer too much information? So that's the thinking part of the data science. And from my perspective, that is the important part. If there are some, well, for coding, this is the important hard skill. But well, if they are in the Master of Data Science program, they should be able to do coding, or they can teach themselves to do coding. So I emphasize more on the reasoning and the thinking of the data science. And another part is the soft skill. And I emphasize on the soft skills a lot, and I encourage students to practice their soft skills and do the storytelling. And there are at least 2 presentations they have to do in my courses, in my classes every semester, just to make sure they are confident in showing what they're capable of doing by tell people compelling stories.
Excellent point. Excellent point. At this point, I want to acknowledge Mr. Earl Stewart. I know he had another engagement going to at 6. So, but Earl, as you can see, and I don't know if you have any last quick points. I'll just give him a chance to weigh in if he has any views on this. But definitely, I know I'll be reaching out back to him to see how JCA could be adding value to this for projects with the university. Any last comments you would like to make, Mr. Stewart, before you have to leave, or you ditto?
Prof Top, Prof Top, let me just say to you and the team, you know, very good initiative.
Yes, thank you.
But very good initiative. I think these conversations are definitely necessary.
Yes.
Especially, you know, the varying ICT topics that are more than ever of importance, based on what you know, and solutions that, you know, to say this, that the Jamaica Customs Agency throughout the COVID period and even through now has been able to be resilient and still contribute to national development due to ICT, leveraging ICT.
Okay.
And so, you know, conversations like this as to...
Yeah, and definitely we will be reaching out to you and Jamaica Customs Agency in particular. And the point that Linkledln made earlier, there's a lot of data out there. There is a lot of experimental value that we can derive from the data. He gave the perfect example of outpatient care and ICU beds. We have the similar problem here in Jamaica, but we have never done an analytic study on it, to be frank. That's so true. So I took that point, and what Yang just indicated as problem solving and thinking skills, great point. So Earl, definitely, I think this is going to be an ongoing podcast series where we do deep dives in more of these issues relating to what we're talking about this evening and related. So you'll be invited back to join with us on one of the other sessions, or a couple of the other sessions, to weigh in on Jamaica's largest shipping and logistics hub viewpoints, right? As it relates to data analytics. So thank you again, sir, for coming, and Godspeed on this Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to everyone in podcast land and Zoom land. Thank you very much for that comment, Mr. Stewart. So I'm dicing it up a little bit, colleagues. Thanks to Young just now for his comment on that view. Sheldon Paul, I recognize and acknowledge the raise of hand. I was signaling to you earlier, but you might have just been away for a minute. But the floor is yours, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. Boy, these conversations, these Sunday conversations are very interesting. You know,
well, on his Mother's Day, you know, and I get a release to do it. I kept the Mother's Day party first before I came to this. So yes, just to tell you, gentlemen, that I make sure I cover myself first before I do this thing, you see? But definitely yes, important.
I'm sure that we all did that because we know how important mothers are and wives are and all of that.
Definitely.
But these conversations are very good for our souls.
Yes.
You know? I didn't catch all of it, but my contribution is in terms of the universities. Universities need to have a strategy and be clear about certain objectives. Are we training students for the global market or our own local market? And I think that there's two different set of trainings or outlooks that we'd have to have. And we have to strategize about where we want to go. So when we're talking about solving world problems, I actually want to be selfish at this time and thinking about solving Jamaica's problems first. I think one of the things that COVID would have taught us is that countries need to become more self-sufficient, self-reliant, right? And therefore, it needs to be able to produce the people that it needs itself to have a healthy economy, right? And not necessarily be so much thinking about how do I create a to serve other countries of this world. I mean, Google is here as well, and company, and they will understand as well what I'm talking about. For example, I mean, when we talk about COVID and ICU and all that, those are real problems for Jamaica. And we should have models or analysts that can help in solving that problem for us. There are a lot of, I mean, different industries here. We will speak big on tourism. Tourism is not where it's at right now. But to me, there would have been a lot of, at the time, tourism will come back in terms of having where those, how can I apply analytics to the tourism industry? The construction industry, it's that's a big industry in Jamaica right now. And I've actually been interacting with quite a number of developers as in construction developers. And most of the things that they do is all manual, right? And actually what they're doing is actually very complicated. You think about these are $1 billion projects. These are a lot of materials and people that you're planning, importation, manufacturing, all kind of things happening there. It's a huge industry. I believe the universities need to have the same kind of partnership with people in the private sector about some of these problems that they need to have solved and how we can get universities, the lecturers and students involved with it. This year there were some students that came from, it was the Mona Business School that came and wanted to do an analysis project with 10x. And it was a 3-month project they were looking to do. And okay, they said they wanted to do inventory management and Salesforce management. And I think, okay, so I said, all right, that's the topic that I chose. And I said, well, if we're going to work on this, have to be something that's very meaningful. But when I started to explain to them all the variables that were involved in order to try to make a difference like this, they were saying, well, it was too complicated from what they were thinking and the time frame that they had. And I said, well, okay, I understand. But then what you're saying then at the end of your exercise is not going to be anything very useful to anybody. And I tend to be like that sometimes, just straight to the point. And maybe, I said, boy, maybe I have to rethink how we kind of work on initiatives like this together. Maybe it have to be where you guys start something and people can continue to build on it further and further, as opposed to, oh, this is just an exercise to just give a maybe get.
And these were master students, right? I think.
Yeah. These are master students.
Okay.
These are master students. Yeah, because in the day, I mean, and then I would have still done it, to tell the truth, but they understood I would not have been getting what I would have been looking for, and I'm not sure where they went off, and for me, I found something else. But I would have went and started to explain a lot of things of how it really works and what some of the issues involved, and everything. I mean, even customs would come into play when it comes to inventory management, right? The whole logistics management and all of that, and demand and supply, and so the point that I want to get at, I mean, analytics is something that's definitely needed. I do believe that the university should be the one really looking at problems within Jamaica and how we can apply analytics to solve these problems in a real way, not in a surface way, because that doesn't really help. It's not helping the student nor the person who has a problem when it's like, just a little paper I'm putting out there and you can't really make use of it. So we need to find a way we work with to really go through and solve some.
I want the university to also understand that, private sector partnerships like what you're mentioning, the industry is prepared to assist with even some basic funding from time to time, because it has been done before. I know your company has done this before in funding projects with like UTech relating to some of these use cases. It's a very valuable conversation we are having here, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to put your comments at the end of the post here as we go through this podcast. A very serious conversation with some very serious gentlemen here who strongly believe in the space of data analytics. I want to almost say that they are evangelists, for want of a better word, as it relates to the whole theme and the topic. And where we are now is creation of value. we took Conrad's point of creation of value that he mentioned earlier, that listen, we need people with soft skills, people with the people skills, people who can think, people who have initiative. Linkledln went and endorsed that. That's what they do at Google. That's the Google culture, the Google way. And that is permeable across various countries around the world who want to adopt this kind of thinking. Now, in this argument, Sheldon Paul just shared that the creation of value, we have to, as a university, think whether or not we are preparing and training local and or international graduates. Well, the mantra in UTech, I should tell you, Sheldon and everyone else here on this podcast session, is that we contend and we continue to support the view that we prepare world-class graduates, because they don't only work in Jamaica, but we have them working at Google, Microsoft, and everywhere else on the planet. But as it relates to solving problems locally, here in Jamaica and the region, there is still a large gap. It could be for various reasons that we're training the talent and they are migrating to solve problems in other spaces that are also having the similar problems for which they need a creation of value. And arguably, we might need to be training a lot more than we need. Microsoft said to me in the last year and a half that if the Caribbean and in Jamaica, we can train 500 data analysts or data scientists, they will move a part of their operations to the Caribbean, and specifically they will move it to the special economic zone in Jamaica. So I'm stepping back to allow the other panels to continue sharing their perspective on how we can create value. Is it we need to do more experimental projects, as Sheldon is saying, in the university? I have a stack full that I'm looking at right now, and I don't think I have hands to help me. But is it that we need to be doing more of that and taking that to the private sector and bringing them into the partnerships? Let me hear the views of the other panelists, going next in order to Conrad, and then Stephen, and then Dr. Campbell in that order.
I think Sheldon's point is maybe one of the top points in the latter part of this discussion about effectiveness of a Jamaican-led transformation. We spoke about it in our first conversation about the fact that, you know, we are trying to talk about creating data science, and we need to create data science because it's the new fad and it's now the new big talking term. But let's stop for a second and say, what do we need it for? Yes. And who needs it? And then, you know, I think Sheldon said it last meeting that we need to sit down and say, where are we? What's the gap at a national level? What's the gap at a corporate level? And then build from there. So basically building with the customer in mind, right? So if we're building these courses, not creating courses for students, or creating courses for a problem, right? So the problem seems to be there is a national data-driven approach that needs to be brought to the government at a national level, and then it should also be permeated at the corporate level, and then figuring out what that gap is, taking it in the Jamaican context, not the exportation context of the Microsoft, understanding that context and say, okay, if we're just to serve our country, this will be the needs and the needs assessment. And from this needs assessment, a course like this would need to be designed. If we say, if that's an objective, then we design it that way. However, if the objective is to export, then we say, what is the need at the exportation level? Maybe that's the master's course, if you understand. And the master's course will be designed for export. And we build back from that and say, what would Microsoft need from our students for us to start recruiting our students to Microsoft, to Facebook, to Google, to get them into seats like Linkledln has gotten for himself, maybe on a personal level? What would that look like? And build back from there. And I think if we get some short-term success, and the short-term success would be doing it for Jamaica. I think I wasn't even looking at it like that. Sheldon Paul's approach will be saying, let's win now, get confidence now, use those to say we are building a solid foundation in the short 1 to 3 years. And within 3, after 3, we can start saying we'll be solid enough to export enough persons to the global market. I'm just using that as a context.
So to add to that, and before I move to the next panel member, what I can say is that at UTech, we have done the needs analysis that inform the rollout of that degree, you know, in data analytics, which is the computer information systems with data analytics being one of the specializations. And we did the empirical study. We collected results from JCS when they keep the annual conferences. We use different forums to collect data that drives how UTech informs its position. So we do have that, but we have always contended that we don't keep a bound on where the graduates should be and should not be working. So hence where I see the gap now is how many local companies like yours, Connell and Shelda, willing to put their mouth where the money is to say, well, listen, we are all data-driven businesses. We are digital transform businesses. We will need to have 100 business analysts or 500 business analysts over the next 5-10 years. We have had to use the world reports like Gallup's and Gartner and Forbes to inform where the trends are with the data analytics skill sets that provides the university with a clear picture of what the needs are. And we have done just that. The issue now, though, is always the question, how many more pixel perfect companies are there in Jamaica who need this talent and innovate 10x and be willing to pay for that created value? We're talking about over 100,000 US dollars for a business analyst a year on average, or 80 to 100,000 US dollars a year for a business analyst. How many local companies can afford or are willing to pay that to support the graduates when they leave the programs of study and then be able to move on into the private sector enterprise? I just bring that point into sharp focus. I'm going to put this now to Mr. Scale and to Dr. Campbell, and any other comments quickly in closing out the point. But I say that to say that the creation of value has to have some kind of alignment relating to where this could be going. So at this point, Sheldon, you're coming back in to respond. You can, if that is it, and then I'll ask Stephen and Dr. Campbell to chime in. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I mean, if that's where the demand is at 80 to 100,000 US a year, I mean, that's a very good export market to go into if these people are actually willing to be residing in Jamaica and earning that money. But if it is in going to earn that 80 to 100,000, they're leaving Jamaica and taking their family overseas, then Jamaica is not benefiting at all from having trained that person at UTech, which is being subsidized by good taxpayers money, all of us right? So we need to think about that. But the thing is about in terms of technology and data analytics now, I am actually trying to have a very broad market for but technology and data analytics. I mean, one of the things that I had worked with the government was a SME go digital. And I've actually seen where not only have DBs given 200,000 Jamaican dollars, which is not a lot, as grant money to go digital to SMEs, right? But Mr. Nigel Clark putting up to $1 billion Jamaican dollars that he's willing to give in terms of low interest loans, 2% for going digital. Now, so what I would say, so analytics to me is not only for the Google of this world. If I even have a restaurant and I need to want to determine how much chicken, pork, beef should I be ordering, because I'm, for example, always running into problem where I am, I'm over ordering, things are spoiling on me, pilferage happening, all kind of things happening. Then somebody needs to be able to come in very cost effective, right? Looking at the data that I have and building a model that it can improve my service delivery, reduce my costs of service. Now, if you think that way for analytics, and I just mentioned a small restaurant, right? There are many people out there who need that service. So you may not end up earning 100,000 US a year, but you could be earning 30,000 US a year, 40,000 US a year, and helping to build our economy.
True. That is
Right?
very true. Yes.
Yes. But
But
that
so,
is where I
okay,
want.
you want it
That's
to
where I
go.
want it to go. Everywhere.
Well, okay, excellent, excellent. I'm going to ask Stephen as well as Dr. Campbell to weigh in on this point here of value creation and how you have elucidated the point very clearly, Sheldon, to support where you see the value creation in our market being. So Stephen, you can take it away, followed by Dr. Campbell to sharing on what Sheldon is saying here. As you take
There are many
them.
there are many opportunities to create value utilizing analytics. And this is where, again, I think if a key word we can take away from this discussion is partnership, where if the university, we can partner with private sector, we can partner with government to identify and select use cases that we can apply data analytics to. We can partner with big techs like Google, who have international connections, who would have done projects of similar nature, who we can come in the same space in some sort of research innovation center lab that we can now solve some problems using analytics. We can build capabilities. We can, from a university perspective, we can earn credit. Students can earn credit. Students can get experience, learn the technical skills. Government can benefit through actually, when we solve these use cases, we can now expand that to create greater value. Utilizing analytics, we can apply that in different government ministries. If we can create just a small project where we can gather data, clean data, analyze the data, create hypotheses and test the hypotheses using data, create models, then these are things that we can expand. We can use it to create efficiencies. We can use it to identify opportunities. We can use it to reduce risk, right? So there's really a lot of opportunities, and I think to identify those opportunities and start to create value, all we need to do is form some key partnerships, sit down, find the list the use cases. We can start with 1 or 2 or 3, create different sub teams, do the necessary training to close the gaps that Sheldon mentioned, so that we can now say, okay, we have the technical skills, we have the support of companies like Google, we have the university with its research methods capabilities, we have private sector who is willing to help fund, willing to give us a space where we can apply the analytics, and we can create these wins. We can get papers out of them. We can look now to say, okay, we apply it to a company in manufacturing. Now, how can we expand this to the broader manufacturing industry, distribution, and so forth? And I think, and not only Jamaica, once we do it and we apply it in a small space and we apply it in a broader sense, then we can now look to say, okay, let's go to the Caribbean. Now, when we develop these capabilities, this experience now, we can start to export persons with this sort of real world, practical, tangible experience, having done projects like these, right? And I think we can become, I really think it's an opportunity for us to become a hub, a supplier, a global supplier of persons with this capability. But we just have to have the vision. We have to really put it together and really start to form these groups, work, get the small wins, develop the experience, develop the partnerships, and trust me, the sky is the limit.
And on that point then, Stephen, brilliant point. And Conrad just signaled that he agreed with Stephen. He has to go shortly. I really want to thank him for his time so far in this podcast session. I want to move to the floor then with an action item. The initiative that Sheldon mentioned earlier that he had at his company to build out a use case in inventory and potentially data visualization.
Did you take my point of view? Are you?
Oh, no, I don't take a point of view. Okay, let me defer. I was just going to move an action to the floor, but okay. Then again, probably let me. I'm going to allow you to weigh in a minute. Should we not immediately, Mr. Scale, take on a project with 2 use cases probably one with Pixel Perfect, where they have a use case, and one with Innovate 10x as examples. With the students we currently have in this data analytics track, because you are one of our subject leaders in the track. And I don't have any terms of reference is there from Google and from Yang Song in terms of how UNCW do those type of simulations, but you could probably get it from them. I would say it's a brilliant set of points that I don't even want it to be wasted. Can we go back into UTech in the Monday week here with a view of taking a team of those 40 students that we have across the year 1 and year 2 of the program, albeit undergraduate, and see how we can engage them to take on one of these two of these use cases at companies like Sheldon and Conrad. I think that's a point. I leave it there and move to Dr. Campbell as the next guest on the session here to let him also weigh. But that's my view on that, Stephen. Brilliant point, and brilliant point from Sheldon and the rest of the team. But that's my weighing on it. Dr. Campbell, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I would say no matter how we look at it, education costs. So whether we trial and error and we have to pay the cost of repairing or error, education still costs. In an environment where UTech's subvention is being diminished, it's declining, and we are to literally be fighting for every dollar that we get. It is even equated to the amount of subvention or support that we get per student, being equivalent to a high school student. That's not a good signal for any institution that is going to be dependent upon to produce world-class graduates. And I think that bearing in mind that the government have the largest set of data that needs to be cleaned, need to be visualized, need to be used to affect our lives, should have a partnership in this. And the way to have this partnership in it is to have a long-term vision wherein they see how they can monetize the data. And if they see that, and they see the kind of skill set that they need around it, how can they help organizations to fund the education of these kinds of talents? And I think they can do it through things like the way they can be creative about the tax code, for example. If, for example, they were to say to Sheldon's company or companies like his, that look, we will give you a write-off on your tax or give you a tax credit for initiatives in this area. You know, could call it a data, whatever fancy name you want to call it, credit tax. So it enables private sector organization to channel funding into universities, and at the same time, when they are writing off their taxes, they can write it off as a tax credit against their tax liabilities. That would be one possible way that they could look at it in terms of funding this the kind of skill set that we need. Without that, it's going to be difficult for us to expect persons to find the kind of monies to get a quality education, and then not to look outward for the best way they can exploit those skills to earn a good living. When youngsters look around and they see that some section of the society seem to prosper, and it is easier to not use education and prosper in an economy, it is challenging. So we have to incentivize education in a way that either we are going to spend the money and educate them and have them serve and work with us, and then we find a way to to get projects and businesses to come into Jamaica to use those talents so that they can benefit, so Jamaica can benefit in a way that Sheldon articulated. Or we partner from the outset with companies that say, okay, we will supply you with these talents. So how can you help us to fund our labs, our professors, etc., that we need to do these things? So that's my take on it.
Excellent point, Dr. Campbell. I think the latter is going to be the easier, the easier one. I could argue that it is easier from the perspective that government has already been approached about the tax incentive. Sheldon Paul and myself, during our tenure as presidents of the Jamaica Computer Society, we had lobbied government. You know, I know the Prime Minister had looked at it and said, well, once you get a tax incentive, it's still a cost to incentivize. And given the challenges of the tax dollar, and even now more so in a pandemic, I suspect the challenges are exacerbated.
So,
although it's a good initiative, you know, because it is done elsewhere in other places around the world. It's a good initiative. In Canada, there's a use cases there in other places. I'm probably saying we probably need to do two things. Probably need to also apply for the tax, get companies to get that tax credit, and JCS organizations like the Jamaica Computer Society still carry that mandate to government, and for universities to also carry that mandate. But at the same time, do the latter of what you just said, which is
so may I ask this? With a finance minister that has this foundation education in computer science and mathematics, can't give that vision to the cabinet?
Well, it might be an argument for a second discussion. I'm not saying yes and I'm not saying no, but it is really, it is in fact the big picture of the type of strategic decision that need to come from the Ministry of Science and Technology as it relates to that build-up. And for whatever reason, what you'll also find that many of those ministries have a lot of private sector individuals also sitting on the boards that weigh in on the suggestions.
But we need to look at the revenue model as well. You can't be just looking at the cost to say it's going to cost, it's going to cost, it's going to cost, it's going to cost us based on how much we have to spend out of the dollar that we earn on taxes. No, you need to look at it. Okay, if we do this, this is how much our pool is going to grow by. And therefore, the net effect of it is going to be positive to the country.
You realize it's an analytical question, right? So if you're going to present a tax incentive to the government, you need to do an analysis on it to show the benefits, the cost benefit analysis, right? So, right. So it's actually data analytics again. So you have to show.
So this is a ticklish one, and I take the point wholeheartedly, Dr. Campbell, because the two sides of the coin that you just presented have their equal opportunities and challenges, but both must be embraced. So in other words, what you have recommended, I'm fully supporting both and serious food for thought. Sheldon, you wanted to tie off the point with anything that Dr. Campbell just articulated? Yes, go ahead.
Boy, you know, we can't wait too much on the government to put certain things in place because we might be waiting in vain. I do believe there is an opportunity within the private sector to fund some of these things you're talking about, if you can demonstrate the return.
Yes.
Right. The analytics that we're talking about is where we're seeing where it will help to save on operational costs or help to improve on your revenue. Right. So the problem that we're looking at solving in the industry must be more than worth the cost of us investing in the data analytics in the university, the lecturers and the students working on it. And maybe there needs to be a model for that as well. We can go out there and quickly assess the problem and the benefits to be gotten, in tangible benefits we've gotten in solving the problem, so we can know what we're working with. And maybe say that the payback time is 3 to 5 years, it's probably fine. You know, so those are the things that need to, and I tell you what, most of the time when I'm out there and I'm getting business from customers now in putting in like a you know, people in Jamaica right now, people still just putting up data warehouse, business intelligence dashboards and all that. We're not even talking about proper analytics as yet. I mean, you have to walk before you start to run. But they see the benefit. They're sitting down on decades of data, and they're not doing anything with it, right? So I'm just putting on that challenge as well. And I'd love to work with the university on something like that, in building models that will allow us to go out there and assess certain businesses and say to them, if we build this model for you, we can save you, 10, 15%, and depending on the size of your revenue, what does that translate to? And then what is the return on investment over a 3-year horizon? That's something business people can understand and will be willing to pay for, right? And maybe the government will follow afterwards, but we can lead the way.
Excellent. So Dr. Campbell, I give us that charge in a sense because we have the capabilities in-house to come up with those kind of projections and those kind of decision models. It segues nicely into the next question as to how do you identify a problem which requires analytics. So we are here and trying to understand our use cases, and Sheldon segued it well. So here's the issue now. I'm going back to Linkledln and Dr. Yang-Song, because I feel that in the space where they are right now in the US, for example, and what they are actively doing, both as industry and academia, they must have figured out by now how they are both creating value in analytics, and specifically creating value by identifying the kind of problems that require the analytics that should solve them. So Linkledln, could you give us in a concrete, tangible way some examples of how the Google environment goes out there and identify problems and come up with the experimental use cases for which to solve those problems? And or if you say, well, you know what, let me contact University of North Carolina, Wilmington, or let me contact UTech. How is this done from where you sit, to explain to us on this panel? Because that is a very key piece that might be a good terms of reference as we go about doing what Sheldon and what Dr. Campbell just said a while ago.
Yeah, so there are different ways to approach this, right? So if you're thinking about, let me finish up on a quick point on the last discussion. So one other thing you could do, and it's just a suggestion now, is that if you have the industry that need help with data analytics, right? What UTech could do, you could have a way to collect, to get projects being submitted to UTech, right? So where that the industry would come in and pay X amount for a project to be done, and then you have teams within your analytics team that would take up that project and do the analysis for them, right? So that's something you could consider. Just like any research project that universities do, where the industry partner come in and you say, okay, I need to do some analysis on X, Y, Z, and you're going to charge them $10,000 or whatever. And some students could form a team and help on that. So that's something you probably should consider. I think that's pretty common with most research universities anyway. So let's go back to the point about identifying problem now. So I'm going to start with a situation in Jamaica first before I go to Google. So in Jamaica, coming from the diaspora, you always hear that crime is a big problem in Jamaica, right? But the question is, what is a driver of crime? Is it money? Is it lack of education? I don't think I have the answer. So how could I answer that question, right? So you have data all over the place. So the first thing you're going to say, hey, what is the main driver of crime? If we attack this driver, maybe crime will go down. And so therefore, that would be a simple problem that you could look at and say, okay, I want to understand what is driving crime and how do I solve it, right? So before you solve it, you need to understand what's driving it, and then basically take all the data you have, ask the right questions, and then you can build a model around it and say, okay, maybe it's lack of education is a problem. That means we need to educate people, right? So that's one thing. So let me go back to Google. I'll give you a good example here. So one of the examples is around reliability, network reliability or infrastructure reliability. One of the questions we have is that, okay, how do you improve availability of the network, right? So one of the things you have to do now, you have to collect data from different subsystems and based on outages and all that stuff and all that thing. And what you do is you use that data now to analyze and say, okay, based on what we're seeing here, we're seeing that maybe poor coding or something is causing, things to fail and stuff like that. So what I'm saying is that you look at the problem in the sense that you're seeing your reliability is going down and you say you have to fix it. You don't know what the problem is upfront, but you go and you collect data around that reliability issue. And based on that, now you'll pinpoint and say, oh, somebody is not practicing good coding practices, or they're not getting proper reviews of their code, something like that. So it's by that data analysis that you discover what the problem is, right? But first you start out with something that's a high priority for the company, for the country, for that matter. And then you go and figure out what data do I need to understand this problem. And then based on that, you do analysis. And then you will pinpoint the North Star, as I call it, North Star metric, that says this is the main driver that's causing the problem, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I can give you a lot more examples, but I'm just giving you those quick ones.
I'll take a couple of the use cases offline from you probably send me as a reference point, but I take very well what you have just said as one example, network reliability. So that is Google doing its own project. It doesn't need to call in anybody to do that. What about if you're doing it with the community? Let's say you needed to probably call in UNC Wilmington and Dr. Son or myself to assist with that. How is that you?
Yes, so we have a research team, we have a team that work with universities as well that look at far-reaching problems, right? A good example would be capacity, right? You cannot grow your capacity infinitely to address all the data that, the buildup of data. So you need to get help from different sources to figure out how do you optimize your capacity to address the growing data need, right? I mean, if you look at it from a linear perspective, you just cannot meet the demand. So you have to figure out now what ways, whether we had more quantum computing or something, right? So what you need now, you need help from the academic community now to do some simulation around, hey, what variable could I change to reduce my, my footprint, but still be able to maintain the amount of data that we're getting in, that kind of thing. So this is where you would go to the university community. So they have research teams that work, like, for example, in capacity, for example, with different research universities and say, hey, help us to solve this problem, right? Maybe we have a security problem. We might say, oh, security, we don't understand the security problem, and we know that this is going to be an issue. So we may contract a university to actually help with that. And the students, PhD students may take on projects around that. And we do have annual summits. Because of COVID, it's kind of reduced, but they have annual summits where students actually come in and present their research findings and stuff based on those kind of things. So there's a very active, they do it actually very proactively, actually. It's very well done here, actually, in that sense.
Good. All right, thank you for that, Linkledln. And I'll throw it back in a moment. So Yang, what is UNCW's approach as a university?
I think Yang dropped off, I think he dropped off, I think he had said his baby called or something earlier.
I probably missed that. Okay. So as a follow-up on the point in Linkledln, I'm passing it back to Stephen and Sheldon. Is it that Google, its R&D, looks at work with universities, and is this something of collaborations started that spawns jurisdiction, because Google is a global company? Is it that you'd make link with Sheldon's company, for example, or Connell's company, and say, okay, let's develop a use case for the Caribbean, and Jamaica is a good example based on what Google may see as a good partner project, and you see where Google, Innovate 10X, Pixel Perfect, and UTech working on that set of use cases. Is that type of situation I just conjured potential possibility?
Yes, it's a possibility, actually. So yes, it's very possible. So what you normally do is each team would have their own programs. And so what you could do is, obviously I could help because I'm there, but you could say, let's say you're good at, say, containerization or something like that, or service mesh that kind of thing. Obviously, a reputation is important because they're going to say, well, you have some expertise in this space, right?
Yes.
And so they would engage you now to say, oh, well, we want to solve this specific problem. And then you would probably work with the program manager to figure out the engagement model, you know, whether money is involved or, you know, resources are involved and stuff like that. So it's very possible. And they've done it. I mean, they work with a lot of partners. You know, we use Cisco switches and routers. We use Arista. So we're always working with these guys to develop their software to accommodate what we're trying to do, and right? The same thing with research. They have many research projects. In fact, I saw an email came out the other day where they were having a new team to actually work on that as well, to work on working with universities, not just in the US, but all over the place.
All over. So I'm going to ask, because, you know, as we close out this podcast soon, what I'm seeing here is very good that the questions are aligned to how you are thinking. I'm really happy that I chose the questions properly. You know, in that I am seeing an action coming out of this meeting so far. One, to really look at references to use cases that we as UTech, and in particular, Mr. Scale and Dr. Campbell, we could derive some experimental value setup. It could be data visualizations, Mr. Scale, where we just look at that as probably one niche for some companies locally. And then there's another angle to this. Another use case that looks at a joint partnership with the equivalent of like a Google, a UTech, and the private sector companies to build out another set of use cases. And then, because that type of track record is going to be very necessary to sit with government in a constructive way to make even higher demands, as well as to even leverage the possibility of getting new export opportunities that can come from this engagement, both as the university and both for the private public sector partnership of companies. That's a very strong point, I think, that is coming out of this conversation that I don't want it to be missed. So you know, working on those kind of projects will build students, will build the companies involved locally, it will build staff in the university. It is a partnership that everybody should be winning. So, all right, so this is how you identify problems. So you're saying manufacture, I can think about it, power, tourism, I think that was brought up earlier, in almost every sector and in every space. We just need to look at priorities of some that we could take as UTech to demonstrate our proof of concept going forward. And then move it from proof of concept to a viable, move it from a proof of concept to a viable use case. So local with companies like Sheldon's and Connor's company, and then a partnership possibility with the likes of a Google, a Sheldon's company, a UTech in terms of some use cases. Outside of this meeting, I will follow up with us to look at what the possibilities are for that, to get funding for those type of initiatives that both the staff and the students will be working on, and deliver on the merit of them as initiatives. So the last point on my dashboard, and I don't know, Stephen and Dr. Campbell, did you see a view on how we should identify problems? I don't think I've asked, so let me ask you first respectfully. Do you see if we have missed anything relating to how we identify a problem that requires analytics? We have heard Linkledln, we heard Sheldon somewhat, but I'm putting the question to yourselves, please, just to weigh in on, are we saying the right things? Is this correct?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I really like Linkledln's example with crime that he did, that really breaks it down and finding something that's really a problem. And I think we have a fairly good idea what the problems are, but in life we have cause and effects. So there are underlying causes to problems and there are causes to the causes. So it's really the data that we can use to help us to really understand the problem at a very deep level and to be able to substantiate that with evidence, a data-driven analysis that tells us exactly what the problem is. And we can iterate and build models and run simulations that can help us to identify what is that lever that we pull. Where do we invest the limited dollar and effort to get the best outcomes? So I think in terms of identifying the problem, we can take it from a number of perspectives. We can probably identify a particular industry to start with. And then we can do some qualitative exploration, exploratory questionnaire
I say both
surveys.
qualitative and quantitative, both qualitative.
Right. In terms of the initial exploration to discover a problem, to then know quantitatively analyze that problem, right? But to talk to the experts within that industry to find out what are the problems from their perspective. And then the other key thing that we have to have is there actually data available for us to analyze? Now, a lot of the time you'll find that data is not collected or stored in any structured way or any way at all. For us to do the kind of analysis that would be required for us to solve the problem. For example, crime. The constabulary force have a database of
data set. Yes.
Right, data set. And then do you have sufficient data on the persons, the communities, the circumstances surrounding crime that would help us to actually do the analysis, to develop the models, to find the problem, to be able to do the analytics. So that's going to be one of the challenges that you may find. You don't have the data. Nobody thought to collect the data to facilitate the analysis. So that may be one of the problems we may find. So one of the things we can use to determine where to start or identify a problem is going to be, we have to find a problem that actually have data for us to analyze in order to solve it. So that can be one of the things that will help us to weed out and select a use case that we can tackle for a proof of concept.
Yes. Good
I kind of hold a different viewpoint in terms of data and where it is. I think we have the data about literally anything in Jamaica because, you know, we talk a lot and we write a lot. So, you know, if we were to get to the archives of the radio stations and all of that, they would have quite a bit of information, but we'd have to have the tools to extract the kind of data that they have there. The newspaper, the Star, the various community papers that report on these things. So data is there. It's just that how do we harness it? How do we collect it? And do we have the tools to put it together in the way that we want it so that we can model what we want to model? A very important question, though, is do we have the will for some of these social problems, does government have the will to act and to use the information that they have at their disposal to solve the problem? So it's going to affect us eventually, because unless we go after feasible problems that are likely to bring us payoffs that will give us repeat business, we may just be spending a lot of resources on social problems that the government may not be willing to
invest in,
to solve, because the data may point to areas that may impact them directly in terms of political parties.
Well, I think this has been a riveting conversation, and it's a very valuable point you just raised there, Dr. Campbell. What I can say about Linkledln's reference to the use case of the crime and what Stephen had mentioned, in 2016, I actually had one graduate student who is a police officer, and who we actually looked at a solution for crime monitoring. And we had used the concept of graph theory in the literature to do cluster and classification modeling on data sets of where would-be gangs would be across the island. And the general idea is that we had some very informative results relating to those studies. But again, that kind of data is not an open data set, to be frank. was a consented data set that we had to carry out that research study, for which we actually have an IEEE peer-reviewed published work, coming out of that, Linkledln and Stephen. I don't know if Dr. Camp might have remembered it, but that was a very interesting project even for me, and the student and myself. We had a very good outcome. Now, yes, I would probably agree that if there's more access to data and with the right teams in place, we could do a lot more to show the kind of results that we want. But we are here in 2021, and I think with the fact that we have a new degree out and we have talent pool of students, I think we should leverage, as Dr. Campbell is saying, to get some access to this data. And I'm willing to have Google come on board in the summer to run their summer analytics, self-assisted, and probably even have some talkable workshops with the students and so on to engage in this very interesting space. The last point I want to raise, and then we wrap up, so we identify the problems and the use cases to which problems can be solved. Modeling a solution for these analytic problems is also important. So Stephen, probably I should start with you. Are we teaching yet the students how to model the solution, not just the tools? Because we could teach them the tools and they apply the tools, and as Conrad said earlier, that might be low end, but they will expect students to come up with models as well. So how well do you think we are prepared to start modeling for analytics, or do we need to complement that with some of the training from the likes of Google and through the short courses where we might have any of those gaps to ensure that the students can meet those targets? Start with you as for your viewpoint.
Yeah, I agree. We would need to close some gaps there, and the expertise of Google would be something that, and the courses that Google offer would help us to learn, or to at least augment what it is that we already do as it relates to modeling solutions for analytics. I think it's an area that we could use some support and some further development on. So that's what I would say about that, Dr.
Okay, so I'm going to show the scenario then to Linkledln, because Linkledln, could you then, in your wisdom, share with us for this summer boot camp that you're recommending? What are some of the focus areas you think then we should have? Will we have an introduction to both the tools, the models? What will come out of the boot camp that elucidates a reasonable use case of how we identify a problem and probably use the model to some type of trained models to solve those problems?
Oh yeah, so let me just give you an overview of what I'm thinking that we could do for the.
Yes.
I mean, I'm still working through the prototype right now. I think what we could do is we have the courses already. So what they could do, the student could take the courses, and they can do it for free. They don't need to pay for that.
Do you have a list? Do you have a list of these courses? I don't, because we're running a podcast. If you had a list anywhere, or you want to just
I can refer to it. Yeah, I can just let me just go.
I can share screen and I'll allow you to bring it up, and you could just say
okay, all right. Okay, let me find the web page quickly.
Yes, so I'm gonna stop sharing and allow you to share, so persons can see and hear.
Co-host. Yeah. All right, so let me go to Google Career Certificates. This one here. I'm gonna go to the data analytics one. By the way, so both Udacity is another site that also offers some good courses as well. I mean, it's not so much of a competitive thing, but they have a similar approach as well. So let me share my screen. Okay, so there's a share button. Okay. Let me see if I can find the, give me 1 second here.
So this has been a very riveting discussion this afternoon. I'm glad we have.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, okay, so this is the one, you can see my screen, right?
Yes, I can see. I think we can.
Okay. Okay, so this is the specialization data analytics certificate. And I'm just gonna go down, scroll down to the bottom here to show the different courses in it. And it's kind of like a sequence. Where is it? Oh, I need to, let me get started here.
This is some cost there. Just to be clear, we won't be incurring a cost to do this summer. This is an audited course that we'll do.
Yeah, you can do audit. Yeah, you can do the audit option. So you can do the audit option. I'm going to look into the scholarship option because they have an option to apply for scholarships as well to take the course. So I'm going to look into that.
And both
and
academic
hopefully-
staff and students can take the course because I know Stephen registered the research group already and the university.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, I think so. I don't think there's any limits on that. So I think the way the courses are structured, so course one is really kind of like give you a good overview of the whole idea of data and data being everywhere and all that we spoke about earlier. So this is kind of like the foundation to say, you know, data is there and you need to analyze it to get insights. And the way the sequence is that you have data, you have information, and then you have insights, right? So this first course is like a foundation to just get your feet wet in terms of understanding that you have all this kind of data out there. The key thing now, as we talk about finding the problem in course 2 now, this is where it's important now, because this is where you talk about asking questions to make data-driven decisions, right? So whether it's crime or, you know, marketing or whatever, you really need to figure out, you need to have a framework where you ask these questions. And I think this is what this course talks about. It talks about how you ask the right questions and then think about where you're going to get the data from. Your questions need to be very clear, because if you don't have a clear question, you can't get a clear answer, right? So you have to figure out how to ask the right questions. So that's course 2. Course 3 now is where you talk about getting the data ready. So whether you're getting the data from some IoT devices or from, you know, Excel files or something, it kind of focuses on getting that data ready for the analysis. Because remember, you may have multiple tables and you need to figure out where those tables are coming from. Are they credible? First, the data need to be credible and all that, because if you're going to do an analysis and give a, you know, recommendation, you need to make sure that data is, you know, is credible, right? So that's course 3, kind of focus on that. We spoke a lot about earlier about the whole idea of getting the data clean. So now that you have your data, you need to make sure the data is in the clean format or in the format that you require. And you can do different things with this. For example, you could use Python, for example. So now we're going to programming now. You could use Python, for example, to clean your data, right? You could write a script in Python or R to clean this data and make it available in a way that can be analyzed. So that's the thing. And of course, number 5 is where you actually do the analysis. Now, this analysis, you can use the different tools, whether it's Tableau, you know, Data Studio, you know, R, programming language, those things, right? So you kind of get a sense of using those different tools now to analyze the data to get answer to your question, right? Now, we talked about visualization earlier with Stephen talk about, right? So we can now talk about how you visualize that result. After you get answer to your questions, you could just be writing a script and you have some tables that you print out. But for most people, like an executive, they want to see a chart or something, right? So you probably want to figure out how to visualize it. So this course talk about how to share data and how to visualize that data, right? And of course, this one talks about a little more programming where you use R, programming language, to do your, you know, do analysis as well. So this kind of deep dive into the R programming language, which is highly used in the industry for data analytics. Of course, you can use Python as well, but this is one of the more specialized language for analytics, right? Now, the last course here, I'm not sure if the audit allow you to do it, but one of the things I'm thinking about for the summer thing is that what we could do, we'd like the students to get in teams. I think that's what we did for the boot camp last year, right, Sean, where we actually let them form teams. And then what they would do is they could actually, the projects that we use cases that we talked about earlier now, some of those teams could actually take on some of those use cases and actually do the analysis, you know, maybe a smaller data set, but they could simulate solving something and just walk through the process. And this is where the case study comes in, right? The capstone, right? Capstone. So basically what they do, they would do a project and then we would do like a demo day at the end where each of them get maybe 5 minutes or so to just talk about what the problem is, how they went about solving it, and what the result is, and stuff like that. So that's something we could do, you know, for the capstone, you know. So that's
Excellent.
pretty much it for the courses. Yeah. Again, the key thing here is to kind of think of it as a process thing. The process is, do I really have a problem? You know, as I go back here to the question section, like what questions am I trying to solve, right? And I think that's a key, you know, that's a key to it, right? And then once you understand that, now you start using the tools and start to figure out how you get the data, how you clean your data, and how to analyze the data, right? So those are the, like these 3 courses, you know, 3, 4, and 5 is where you get into the meat of it in terms of actually coming up with the answer. But you know, I think that's pretty much.
So question, I realize that Google has an enrollment starting from May 9th, started May 9th. So how long will this course run for? And in our case, if we're doing it as a boot camp, how long will it take us to complete this?
Okay, so let me clarify that.
Yes.
Yeah, let me clarify that. So the course is on demand. So if you log in tomorrow, you would say start May 10. So it's not, yeah. So whenever you start it, it start the date that you sign up, right? Because it's on demand. It's actually, the videos are online and everything. So you can take it right away. So if you take all 5 of them, 6 of them, 7 of them, or 8 of them, I should say. If you take all 8 of them, typically them assume somebody can do them in about maybe 6 months, roughly. Right. But if you're doing it intensely, like, you know, spending the whole week on it, you could probably do it within a couple months.
Still
In
a couple
fact,
months,
less than
because
that.
just to learn R is still non-trivial for some persons who might be new.
Yes, exactly. So if you don't have any programming background, it maybe that would take a little longer. But what I'm saying is, if you're a student and you're not going to class and you're just doing it full time, you know, like let's say you're spending maybe 4 or 6 hours a day, you could probably finish it within a month and a half. I mean, because you're pretty much going intensely at it, and you have, you know, Sundays, you know, I'm not going to say Saturday because you're not supposed to work, but right. But I mean, you can, you know, you could probably do, if you're doing that, you could definitely.
So 6 months, 6 months for the self-paced training, as you suggest. But if we do it in a boot camp to cover the areas across the 7 or 8 courses, how long would we take to do the boot camp? 2 weeks, you think?
I mean, I think we should do it longer. I think we should do it a month. We should do a month,
okay,
because
okay.
because what I'll do, yes. Because what I'm trying to do is, I want him to take the course. That's like the core. But what I'm going to do is I'm trying to find some experts that can come and talk on different areas. For example, somebody could talk about how to prepare, how to clean your data, for example, and some technique and stuff. But the course is still the core information, but the person is going to clarify, answer questions around some best practices. Same thing for visualization, for example, and things. So that's the format I'm thinking about, you know. And then maybe with Stephen and team, we can also see if we can get any local experts who can also come in and talk about their experience as well, in terms of different areas of data analytics, you know, that kind of thing. Right. So, right. So, in fact, Sean, maybe sometime this week we can get together and chat about some of the logistics about it.
Definitely.
Yeah,
we will do that. And one more thing I should ask here, based on this Google Analytics Professional Certificate, when persons are finished with it, based on Google's standpoint, what have they been doing? I mean, how long have you been offering the certificate, by the way? And when they
this one is very recent.
It's very recent. So okay. So
yeah, this one is a start.
So what are the plans then by Google that when somebody completes this certificate, they should be able to use it? Is it that Google is using it to hire? Are the companies aligned to it to say, well, okay, if you have a Google professional certificate, you can now get some type of employment at this level with me? And it's a double barrel question. Is this something you're recommending to us here in Jamaica, including the Jamaica Computer Society, not only the universities, that they should onboard the professional certificate as a part of continuous professional development credits?
Yes, I totally agree. All of the above, yes. So in terms of hiring, they're not going to guarantee you any specific job, for example. But what it would do, if you apply for a job, I think there's a note here somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so this one, it says here, it prepare for a job that is a junior or associate data analyst, database administrator, right? Or, you know, these kind of jobs, right? So if you apply for a job like this, for example, in Google or another company, that company would look at this certificate and say, okay, based on what we need for this job, this certificate would cover the theoretical, you know, the foundations for this job, right? Now, as I told you earlier, the way they interview people, they're going to check your competence. So you better be able to answer questions around the topic when they come to you, right? So they're not going to necessarily look for your degree per se, but it's really the competency they're going to look at. And they have levels, you know, they have from level 3 all the way up. So they may look at you and say, okay, based on taking the certificate, you may be a level 3, which is kind of the low level. But, you know, if you're good and you have a degree and you have a master's, you may end up as a level 5, you know, that kind of thing.
So can you explain the levels for us quickly, from level 1 to level, what's the differences here?
Yeah, so that's in a nutshell, what it is that typically a graduate would come in maybe at a level 3. And so that's kind of like an entry level role, right? So they look at it in terms of competence, kind of hard to explain in the,
so it's a first degree, that's a first degree graduate, okay.
Yes, yeah, so like a new grad, right? So basically this person would need some kind of supervision, you know, a little more supervision than a regular, you know, like a senior employee, right? So you would have to guide this person because they're new to the profession and thing. So a level 4 now is a person who's a little more independent. They're able to take on projects on their own. They're able to deliver, you know, take on more complex things. Definitely a level 5 is a more complex person, can take on complex. So level 6 now can do, you know, you could say more strategic position, right? So you can do more strategic stuff like looking at a problem from scratch, devising the hypothesis, you know, get buy-in from different people to engage in a project, that kind of thing. So, you know, an entry-level analyst may be given a task like say, hey, go analyze this set of data, right? For example. But somebody who is maybe a level 6 would actually come up with a problem to begin with. You know, you see what I'm saying? I'm just trying to give you some context here. They may come up with a problem and say, oh, you know, we have a reliability problem when we roll out some changes or some patches. And we think that there's something here that we need to look into. And that person would start from scratch and they would be able to define it and work through it and take it to the end, right? Well, maybe as somebody who's at entry level now, taking this course, they know the tools, they know all of these things, but you have to give them the specific task and say, here's a set of data, go and analyze it and give me some, you know, some reports on that, right? I might even tell them what type of reports I want and those kind of things. So it's really a level, they kind of look at it in terms of your competency level, right? And it's really come back to your experience as well, you know, that kind of thing.
So I'm not going to hold because probably Dr. Campbell and Mr. Scale want to weigh in on a quick one. You mentioned moving, we can go to Udacity to do courses. Is it that as the institution, UTech, we should also think about putting probably our data visualization course with Udacity to complement us teaching this Google Analytics provision? Just to be clear, what is the link with the Udacity and Google and how you suggest we bridge that partnership to promote the data analytics area?
You asked me that question, right? I mean, you want me to answer?
Yes.
Oh, okay, right. So if you look at this one, it calls Coursera, right? Coursera is
Coursera. Yes,
yeah, Coursera is a platform. It's an open platform. So actually, UTech, most of the people on here are actually universities, actually.
Yes.
So most of these universities offer certificates on Coursera, and I think and Udacity as well. In fact, Udacity and Coursera started out the same time.
Yes, Udemy.
So yes, all of them. Yeah. So basically, what you could do as UTech, you could actually go on there and offer. I don't know what their business model is, how much you have to pay them or anything like that. But you go on there and you put a course on there, and then the idea behind Coursera and those things is that somebody in Africa or somewhere in Europe or wherever would take that same course. You're right. So it's the whole idea to scale. It's a scale education, right? So basically, the reason why Google is using them is like saying, hey, when we put it on here, look at this. You have 137,000 people registered for this course, right? So you couldn't do that, obviously, at UTech locally, you couldn't do that alone, right? Because that's like your alumni from way back, you know?
Right.
So you're looking at one course right now that within the last maybe 6 months, you have this amount of people who can register. So it's really allow you to scale. And in fact, you could use it to generate revenue for the university as well, because
Right,
you could
right.
actually charge a fee for the course, and that could
Well,
generate
well,
some
well,
revenue.
we are aware of this model, which we're looking into these things. I was just wondering if this Google certificate program had any
Mhm.
special collaborations with these platforms for which you are suggesting that we could look at some special partnership if we went there with the Google the career certificate as well.
Oh, I see. Okay, I would have
Yes,
to look into that, but
you have to look into.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
All right.
yeah. I'll make a note here.
Yes, so if there's any partnership opportunities there. But
Yes.
all right, so this has been good. Dr. Campbell and Mr. Skill, you have the last words on this podcast in terms of the discussions. Any last remarks on what you're seeing here and otherwise, generally from today's session?
Well, I just like to endorse all that have been said, and we have quite a number of things to work on. Certainly, we have some information that we can go back to our own drawing board to look at from a UTech perspective. How can we now dovetail into what industry is doing and better serve the community? That's my take on it.
Excellent. And what I can say from a little bit of data analytics here, all three of you go to the same type of church. You're Adventists. Just in case you didn't know,
Okay.
I just did that analytics a while ago. 1, 2, 3. Yes.
That's very good.
Or any last words, Stephen, on this session?
I picked it up when Markland was talking. You know, he
Yes,
was
you pick it up.
station on labor.
Yeah, indeed, yeah, we are Sabbath keepers.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very healthy discussion, and I like that we're having the discussion. I really hope that we can take it to the next level and actually build out on the concept. There's a lot of opportunity for analytics, and there's a lot of room for growth. And I think if we can really align our efforts and forge the right partnerships, then we certainly can make a lot of headway in this space. So I'm really looking forward to continuing this drive towards developing the analytics capabilities and really a research innovation center for data analytics, so that we can start to solve some of the problems in our society and in industry.
Well, I think it's a very good parting note, and I think we're going to start with Google. We're going to start with Google and Linkledln and this initiative. And for what I know of Linkledln, his ideas spring very quickly, and I must admit, he's a man who moves on his word. He moves on his word. So you have to know to keep up with him too. But I love how his energy that he brings to the table, and I think I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how we can leverage this partnership as a School of Computing and Information Technology with Google as a first runner here on the analytics provision, and the students and the staff and the community at UTech will be very happy to have this on board. So we want to thank Linkledln for engaging us on the initiative. Any more comments, any quick last comments, Linkledln? I'm just going to remind all our podcast listeners and viewers to leave a comment in the post when they review the session, so we can actually follow up for feedback. But any last words from you, Linkledln?
Yeah, no, it was really great to be here. It was a really healthy discussion. I think personally, what I would love to see is more intellectual property being created in Jamaica, where Jamaica become a creator of technology versus user, so that's kind of my thing. So definitely
we have a research group that we just formed recently. I think I just introduced you to it briefly because we're talking about the session, but the IP and the patent and so on. We would definitely love to go there. So I think that will be another podcast. This will be another podcast session by itself, that we can actually explore the IP and intellectual, and there's a lot of things there to on top. So great, gentlemen. Great having this, and we'll follow up in short order, Linkledln, on the dates. I think we want to sign off on the dates for when Google Analytics will be offered this summer. So I will simply just pitch it to the public that it is coming this summer, but I defer
Okay.
to you to advise me on the date when we can have the boot camp and we'll action it in
Yes.
that order.
Definitely. So yeah, we'll catch up this week and we can work out that. Yeah, definitely.
Appreciate that. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Sir Campbell, I'll give you a ring at the end of this, if anything, and have a wonderful weekend for what is left of it. So the recordings for this will be posted, as I said, as a part